Welcome. My name is Shadows, Lord of Shadows, and this is the Shadow Council.
We're all gonna do Sean Connery impressions through the whole thing.
Whichever you prefer.
Well, of course, it's an honor.
I was speaking my normal voice because I can't do accents. But sorry, I'm not participating in the game. But no, no,
Just two
as the
drunken Scotsmen and a confused Englishman.
Oh my god.
as the only honorary Britishman, I would say that both of your accents were not offensive. Well, welcome to the Shadow Council, everybody. Really glad to be here again. Looking forward to this chat.
Well, thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks for putting this together, Adam.
Anyway,
Sorry, Lord of
like,
Shadows.
yeah, it's fine. It's okay. Don't worry about it. Anyway, guys, like across the years, we had so many different spy genres. Like we had The Man from Uncle, Avengers, like we had The Kingsman, and so many different like different spy worlds. But no one ever comes close to James Bond 007, created by the one and only Ian Fleming, who basically started this spy genre, basically, with his like amazing novels.
I mean, I just want to say, and this will sort of carry through my opinion, and especially Mr. Shadows here has been aware of my excitement level for this, is because, as big film fans as we are, you sort of attach yourself to a certain genre, a certain franchise, and what we've seen over the past few years is really superhero renaissance. Moving forward, where everybody, Marvel, DC, Star Wars. For me, James Bond is that franchise. Like that is my favorite franchise, my favorite film of all time. If anybody asks me, is Casino Royale. 2006, that first film starring Daniel Craig. So just I've got such fond memories. My dad loves it. My grandparents love it. And it almost feels like the Bond franchise is something special. The way that we perceive movies and within this spy genre, you can't not put a James Bond movie within the mix. And for me, this is a really, really great podcast just because, I've seen all of these movies countless times before, and it is such a special franchise that, I would say, feels a lot to me as an honorary Englishman. It is part of our culture, and it also that perception of, there's some who defeats the bad guys, get the women, and looks bloody good doing it. And that's part of British culture. So I'm very, very looking forward to this. That's where I stand as the true 007 fan. So I don't know how everyone else feels, but I'm really excited to get in this conversation.
No, me too. I grew up on the novels. I loved the whole franchise. When I was a little kid, I saw all the old Connery films, and I grew up on the Daniel Craig movies that really were coming out as I grew up. Um, and he really is, like, I think he's the first Bond since Sean Connery to fit the role in that way that's as singularly iconic. And so it's interesting now that we're coming out of that era, and that the Bond franchise is kind of looking to find something new. Um, Especially as, like, we do have that superhero landscape that things are coming from, and I think Bond would do itself well to kind of steer in the opposite direction and kind of go like, well, how can we provide something alternative in the culture and show something like really, really thrilling and like well crafted as like a spy story. And I love a great, well crafted spy story. And Bond has always been like a really good framework on which to build those things. And as the movies have gone on, of course, they've gotten more cartoony before they brought themselves back down to earth with Craig. And I think that it's really exciting for us to be able to see, to bring it back to like the Fleming novels and to kind of like reconsider. He's public domain now in Canada, which is interesting because of just how huge a franchise it still continues to be. The fact that I could just make a movie about Bond and do it legally is kind of interesting, and that kind of shows, it's kind of a testament to his staying power, just how lasting the character is.
True. I mean, to be honest, you kind of look like Trevelyan.
Like who?
Alec. The played by the actor of Boromir.
Oh yeah, like yeah, it looked like the villain in Goldeneye.
Yeah, exactly.
That rocks. I would love to play a Bond villain. If the Broccolis are listening, please, for the love of God, let me be a Bond villain.
I mean,
would
like,
love it.
one of the things that also kind of touches my heart is that
I look like Jaws. Is that my comparison? Will I look Jaws?
Oh my God. I mean, honestly, like, if I have to play like a Bond villain, I mean, I think like I'll be basically like a mixture of like Blofeld with hair on and Dr. Claw from Inspector Gadget.
I love that. That's great.
I love that.
Yeah.
That's great. That's great.
Oh my God. I mean, like, but yeah, I mean, to be honest, you kind of look like him, with the haircut and everything. The only thing you need is the burn scar. That's all you need.
No, that's true. That's true. I feel like I can.
Don't do that. Don't do that.
No, I'm a method actor. No, I take all
there
that
we go.
Don't do
seriously.
this at home, kids.
You gotta get the real burn.
Oh yeah. Oh my God.
But I think it's really interesting what Noah said about different cultures, because I one of the things why I love Bond so much is that we live in a world now, and we live in a world of movies, and I'm sure we can all agree is every single movie is constantly reviewed, it's constantly critiqued, and it almost sort of feels like when it's positive, it begins a franchise or a series or a prequel or something like that. What I love about these movies is that you go through 3 movies and you might really, really hate the last 2 movies of the franchise. You absolutely hate them, really, really poorly reviewed. That franchise will be like, we will not be doing a 4th film. They've made 26 Bond movies. They've gone through culture and life to be in 1960. Embraced the culture of the times, and it moved ahead of that. It was very relevant. It paid attention to the culture and the way that the world was changing. The worst movie in the franchise by a country mile for me is Die Another Day. But the reason why they decided to move that to a lot of ice action was because the year prior it was, sadly, it was 9/11. So the perception of seeing buildings being blown up was almost sort of, it didn't really fit the culture of the time, because everybody, for good reason, was incredibly scared about the potential future. That's paying attention to the dynamic. Moonraker, released in 1979, I believe. That was 2 years after Star Wars. And you think, well, that's not a coincidence. They looked at the sci-fi genre, how popular that was getting with you. Star Trek, Star Wars, Alien as well had just come out a bit prior, or even the year it released. They're paying attention and just really, really love the fact that franchise continuously. You might not like every Bond movie. You might have been to an event. Oh, we've got another Bond movie. Oh, that's the 3rd Daniel Craig. Oh, brilliant. We've got this musician singing the theme song. I like her music. Almost like everything together within the world of entertainment. I can't think of a franchise that generally does that, where part of a Bond movie is fluid and I didn't enjoy it. You get and I'm there. And that's what's so special about it. And that's why I love it so much. So it was really interesting what Noah said about culture, because I think you grow up. Just going to use my grandma here, who remembers going to watch that first Bond movie, and she went, "I grew up with Bond. I've seen all different changes," and that's what's really, really special. I did watch with her. unbelievably shocked about the ending. No words about that. She was shocked, but it was just a special franchise for her. So I think that's really interesting. No, you bring up a point there.
Thank you.
No, I mean everything you said. Like I couldn't have said it better myself. Like it is true. Like everything you said. Even though for me personally, like speaking of like bonds, like which ones like we grew up with and everything. Like for me personally, like the ones that I've seen in theater, like are actually the Daniel Craig James Bond movies. Like all the way from Casino Royale to Quantum Solace to Skyfall to Spectre and also No Time to Die. Like those are the ones that I saw in the theater, but the ones I grew up with, like sure, also Pierce Brosnan was one of them, but the one I grew up with, which is actually thankfully to my because of my father, he introduced me to the world of James Bond, and the one I grew up with is actually Sean Connery. Like his Bond movies are the ones I grew up with, and even though some people will tell me like, who's your favorite James Bond, and for me personally, I always say Sean Connery. Like for me personally, he had everything from the character, the charisma, the style, the looks. Like he had everything, and even though I'm sad that Sean Connery didn't like that role, but like for me personally, like he did an amazing job. All like from Doctor No, all the way to like, even though it's non-canon, okay, fine, but like Never Say Never, until like Never Say Never. Like he played James Bond till the end with a banger, But I mean, I will still say this. Like, I mean, I give all the actors a shot. Like from Sean Connery to what's the name of the actor who played him in Her Majesty's Service?
George Lazenby.
Thank you. Even him, Timothy Dalton, like Roger Moore, Pierce Brosnan, Daniel Craig, like even like from the original Casino Royale, like Peter Niven, I think it was his name.
David. It was David Niven and Peter Sellers.
Thank you. Like even David Niven, like even he's James Bond.
Oh, he
like,
was great, actually.
Yeah. I mean, first and foremost, like David Niven for me, like he is one of those actors. Like when you see him, you already think to yourself, like, yep, he is a totally British guy. Like the way he talks, the way he moves, and everything. Like he was also really great. But for me, number one will always be Sean Connery. Like this is the James Bond I grew up with.
I think he was in that fantastic position where, the character was sort of in a time where a lot of people were really, obviously just coming off of, the war and stuff like that, and really sort of, knowing that there's a guy out there. But he's such a cool individual. And yes, behind the scenes production, but that was also at a time where movies were so fast in terms of production. You had on the premiere of Goldfinger in the day they were filming Thunderball. Like it's like literally just back to back to back, and that's that's crazy. I absolutely love. I mean, for me, if we're going like best and worst of Sean Connery, I would say Diamonds Are Forever is probably a lower one for me. But really, that them first, even it's hard to put in. It's hard to really sort of look away from them first 4 movies that he did. And Goldfinger for me is the best Sean Connery movie, just because it adds all of the parts of Bond. That's so cool. But that was at a time where a lot of people would go, "Oh God, I don't want to watch this," a 1960s spy movie. But it's so intelligent. It's almost like it really sticks to the time. So for me, I'd say Goldfinger is when you look at it, it's top tier. It's still top tier. It still holds up, which I think is great.
I just rewatched it this past year, and it's the perfect Bond film.
Also, can we just simply like bring in a little small fact here? Like Auric Goldfinger was like the only villain in these movies that was outside of Spectre. Every single one of them were like from Blofeld to Emilio Largo to like everyone else. Like they were all Spectre members. Like even Mr. Kidd and like the other one, like every single one of them were like Spectre members. Goldfinger was the only one that was outside the box, and I was like, when I watched Goldfinger, and I was like, oh my God, he's not a member of Spectre. For me personally, it was a breath of fresh air. Like we had like a villain that is outside the box. You know, even
Well,
though
thank
personally,
God. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, personally, don't get me wrong. Like every single villain in James Bond movies, like all of them were great. Like even I would say this: a lot of people shit on the villain from Moonraker. Like what was his name? Um, I can't remember his name exactly, but like even the actor who played him, like the style, the dialogue, and everything. Like a lot of people shit on that movie and the villain, but for me personally, like Moonraker, if I have to say, when it comes to James Bond, is one of my guilty pleasures.
Yes.
I like that movie because I think it's fun. I really do, and I thought the villain was actually pretty solid. If I have to be honest, I thought that he was pretty solid. And also, like what you mentioned before, like the girls thing. I mean, James Bond movies are well known for one more thing, like the women. Like
Yes.
every single one that is with James Bond, he gets them in the end. Like
And
no matter what.
which is interesting, actually, because we were just talking about Goldfinger, and this is a change from the book to the movie that is very noteworthy. And it's something that actually is like, it's a good segue. Maybe the best way to explain this is actually like, I have a pitch for you guys for a Bond movie,
Go on.
Okay.
which it is an adaptation of Goldfinger.
Hmm.
It would star Colin Farrell as Bond and Stellan Skarsgård as Auric Goldfinger.
Wow.
And
Man.
thank you.
Wow. From a German to a Swedish.
And the goal with this one would be Fleming's Bond is a flawed man. He's a drunk. He's an exhibitionist. He gets the job done, but he has these sort of mental distortions that kind of make him this sort of desensitized wreck. That is a very
Basically,
compelling
Skyfall.
character to watch. Yeah. And so I wanted to lean into that, and Colin Farrell with his kind of furrowed brow, just always, that level of frustration he's so good at playing. But the goal with it is like in the original book, Pussy Galore and her group of thieves are lesbians. They have no attraction to Bond. And so like despite Bond's insistence it's nice to actually be able to show like, yes, there are love interests in the story and he gets his chance to be a romantic, but it's nice that we actually get the chance to see someone who kind of brick walls Bond in that way. It allows us to actually get to know Bond on a different level and to see like, can he actually be respectful towards women that he doesn't want to sleep with? Is that even possible for him? And I think that's kind of something that like in a way Ian Fleming was actually far ahead of the movies that came afterwards.
Indeed.
In the thought and intelligence that he put into them. Bond, they were far more critical of Bond as a central character, and also of the idea of mindlessly serving Queen and country, especially with the fact that like Bond is a Scotsman, and the way that the English have oppressed Scotland for so long. There's an interesting relationship.
Guilty. Guilty. Yes,
guilty as charged. But like it's interesting then to have Bond be the sort of extending hand of the government doing these dirty things for them. That's something I think that's would be more interesting to explore in the Bond franchise, because Fleming actually did it very well, but the movies have sort of gone out of their way to kind of avoid confronting that side of it. And I just quite like that. Plus, you get, you could open on like the border crossing crisis in Mexico, and have like a helicopter chase, and then you can have him, with his double bourbon in the Miami airport, and meeting Goldfinger at the sort of like tacky 50s Miami resorts, and you could have like in Switzerland, you could have a great ski chase. So it's filled with like those classic Bond action set pieces. while still bringing things back to this thing where it's like, oh, is Bond actually a good thing for the world? I don't know.
Honestly, like I'll be honest, like when you mentioned Scotland, like now actually you gave me an idea for a James Bond story where basically the main villain is a Scottish character, like even though for me it would be basically not just simply in my story, I think like it will show not just simply the history between the United Kingdom and Scotland, but also like you will see a political side of it as well. And basically, uh, all of those elements will kind of give my character like a motivation, like why he wants to do what he wants to do. In which right now my idea is basically a massive genocide of the UK. Basically,
What is like? I feel like turning like as a good people. Oh my god! But no, I do have a question. I do have a question for Noah though. If you feel like it's really, really intriguing idea and intriguing story, but in an intriguing direction to go with it. Colin Farrell, you mentioned Colin Farrell. He's a fantastic actor. Banshee. I just watched it. My God, what a fantastic movie that was. Really, really brilliant. Is it a case where, because you casted him in that version of James Bond, do you think he could be the best person to do that? Would you like to see him play Bond in the traditional way we've seen, the way Bond has been portrayed? I know there's obviously the things about his age. Is that type of thing there? I understand that might be a factor against it. Would you think that he would play a bit of more of a streamlined Bond, or do you think if they take it in that direction, he could be the best person to go for it?
I think he'd be perfect. I'll put it this way. I think he's perfect as Fleming's Bond, where Fleming's Bond is a more flawed person, and the books are more self-critical in that way. I don't know if the movies would go for that, and I think because of the way he acts, and the thing I find so interesting about him playing that role is his ability to play flawed characters, like seeing him in Martin McDonagh's projects like In Bruges or The Banshees of Inisherin or Seven Psychopaths. He's so good at this very specific kind of wreck, of like nervous wreck, who's and that's what I'd really love to see him lean into. I'm not as interested in seeing him play suave and cool. Where though I do think that Bond should skew older. I'm not very interested in a young Bond. I know they're toying with the idea of going with like Aaron Taylor Johnson and steering in a younger direction. I don't think that's very interesting. I think that seems like kind of Marvelizing, making it a little bit more commercial.
I'll be honest. Like I've heard so many rumors about James Bond and everything, and I heard like stories that they were planning to do a James Bond like in his 30s or something. Like I've heard those stories, but I will say this: there's only one person I believe when it comes to the announcement, the news, and everything, and that is Broccoli. I only believe her because like she's in charge. She was in charge like after. After she inherited the job from her father, which is one of the things I love about those James Bond movies. It's when it comes to producers, it's a family's job, basically, like from her father to her daughter, and like I love that. Like the way how she took the job. But I will say this. Like even though you guys remember the stories like of people saying that they could go with like a woman 007, Broccoli, like her daughter, she was the first one who said, nope, James Bond is going to be a man, not a woman. Like, this is a man's job. This is a man's role. Like, we're not going to turn him into a woman, and like, if she's saying it, then this is it. But basically, for me personally, like you said, that like you want to go with an older James Bond, Noah. And honestly, I'll be on board on that. Like I would love to see like an older James Bond, basically because the way how I understood, like they want to go in the 30s, like basically how James Bond started his career, basically like the first years. But
they already did that. They already did that.
I know, exactly. And honestly, I would love to see like a veteran like James Bond, like basically someone who's already on the field countless times. I mean, something like Sean Connery and Moore were basically.
Mhm.
They were already like spy veterans, basically.
Yeah, and I think that's the way to do it, is like it's more satisfying from a story perspective at this point if they don't try and just reboot it every few years where they have like a young actor who ages into his 40s or early 50s and then closes out the role. If you do that every few years, that's really not interesting.
Yeah,
Because you're just seeing like the same thing. It's like seeing Uncle Ben be shot a trillion times on an endless loop for all eternity. It's
or
like nobody
or
needs that.
even better, seeing the Waynes getting murdered
Oh
multiple
yeah, I'm just clamoring at the bit to see that again. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I think like with Bond, it's way more interesting if like, so what if an actor gets one movie as Bond? If it's a great movie, that's what matters. And then
I
if they
mean,
wanted to do something different afterwards, then do that different thing afterwards. I don't care, but like I don't need it to be like every actor's got their trilogy or quadrilogy or whatever. It
also,
make a good movie, and that's it. And then if you
I
want to
totally
change
agree
things
with
up,
you.
do
I
it.
totally agree with you when it comes to that. Just simply make a great movie. Give me an interesting story and interesting characters and villains. Like that's the only thing I need. But I'll say even this. Like I'll be honest. Like some people even give me shit when I mention that because I was going like off board, like James Bond's tradition. But instead of bringing Spectre back, like why don't like basically like for example they tried a few times. Why not bring like for every single movie either two things. One, you create a brand new, for example, criminal organization, that basically terrorizes the world of James Bond, or even better, each and every movie has a completely new villain outside
Mhm.
Spectre, outside even like Smirch from Orson Welles, James Bond, like basically, okay, basically just for example, like Christopher Walken was, or
Mhm.
Ari Goldfinger, or like Alec Trevelyan, like from GoldenEye, or like what was the guy who was a drug lord in one of the movies? Um,
Marco Silva.
Yeah.
No, no,
So
no, no, no.
there were
He was.
multiple drug lords. There were multiple
Um,
drug lords.
Yeah, yeah.
sorry. Let me be more specific. He was played by a black actor.
Oh, this was in You Only Live Twice, I think. Or
Yeah,
yeah.
Yes,
That's
yes,
Mr. Big. Mr. Big is the villain.
exactly.
Mr. Big.
He
Is that
was.
Live and Let Die? Live and Let Die, I think.
I think it
But
actually you know
I'm
what?
not sure right
I
now.
think I'm
Like,
getting the title wrong. Just a moment.
but the point is, I mean that's one of the reasons why even I enjoyed Moonraker even more because those were villains outside the Spectre box. You know, doing
Live and
their
Let
own
Die, yeah.
thing.
Yeah, Live and Let Die.
Okay. So that's the thing. If you want to go with like even a veteran James Bond, like you said, older, just bring me fresh new villains like outside Spectre. I'm not saying that they should eliminate Spectre forever. No. I'm just saying that for a new franchise, just bring more like, how can I put this? Solo villains, basically.
Yeah, Spectre
I'm
needs a
gonna.
rest.
Yes, the other day I was just going to say that. Yeah, but I'm going to put something on the table if you don't mind. I think you'll probably be intrigued to hear this. So, I agree with you fully about an older James Bond, but I'm also going to put something out there. I generally, because I absolutely love reading these novels. Like I started off with the Alex Rider novels, and then I like that really got me into the spies, like reading the spy stories. Then between Alex Rider and reading Ian Fleming's James Bond, I read the young James Bond novels, and I would love to see a young James Bond film. The main reason why is because it's particularly what happened in Skyfall. Because what happened in Skyfall at the end when he goes to his house in Scotland is you touch on very, very much his past. That was later revealed in Spectre with the idea of Blofeld, Blofeld's dad bringing in Bond. I think that's a very intriguing story. You've got the audience for it. You've got a massive fandom who would be very, very interested to see that early work. It's always been touched on, particularly in Craig's films. I do generally think that I think it is potentially interesting to have a younger James Bond coming in, and then I think it almost pleases fans that go, we've got a young James Bond, and then we've got this older veteran James Bond, because you're appealing to all audiences. And also, it takes very much the preference of which one do you prefer. We'll give you a young Bond, we'll give you an older Bond, we'll push forward with it. And I do think that it's, we've seen now so many franchises go in different directions, going, telling more stories. Like I said, Bond has always been down that very one-dimensional route of, new Bond, new stories. I do think that it's potentially time to change the mantle, but you can change, but also add to it as well. So that one, I would love to see a young Bond film. Tom Holland is probably the front runner to potentially be that. I do think he has.
Oh no way! I couldn't bear that.
Oh my
I
god.
mean, he is the front runner, but I'm not too sure who could potentially. But maybe Aaron Taylor Johnson, because I like him in Bullet Train. He was really, really good in Bullet Train. Like, that was such a great film. So potentially, I'd like to see him, but I do think that it will show a more brutal side of Bond as well, particularly the way that we saw with last year's The Batman, because The Batman was taking place in the first year where Bruce Wayne was very, very brutal and didn't really know what the whole Batman symbol was really for, because he was very, very brutal. He was still obviously incredibly angry about the death of his parents. The way it's been touched on is that Bond was exactly like that, and then MI6 built him up to be the spy we know and love today. I think that's a really interesting direction you can take the story and appeal to both sets of fans, because you have young fans and older fans really, really enjoy Bond. You can get the best out of sort of two franchises side by side.
I would, if you're going in a young Bond direction, I would throw Pattinson into the ring, as well as Nicholas Hoult.
Probably Nicholas Hoult. I wouldn't say Patterson's busy. He's busy. Yeah. He's got his character now.
No, that's true. And being Batman, you don't have to be James Bond if you're Batman. But he would be very good. I think he'd be very unexpected and very interesting. It'd be nice to actually get an actually Scottish actor.
I like Nicholas Hoult in The Menu.
Yeah.
The Menu
was great.
The top, but that was in my top 10 favorites of last year. I really, really did enjoy that film. He probably didn't have the bigger role in that, but I really enjoyed him in that. So I think that'd be a great pick.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at all the actors who played James Bond, Sean Connery was the only one who was Scottish, I think.
Yeah.
Yep.
He was the only one.
And then Lazenby was Australian.
Yes, he was Australian. Yes. And I mean, I'll be honest, like on Her Majesty's Service, where he played him, I mean, even that movie for me was fine. But but I think like the main reason why I really like that movie, I would say because of Kojak as Blofeld.
Yeah, that's the added thing. But and again, that does take risks. That was the first sort of Bond movie where it did take risks, and you're like, hang on a minute, you can't do that to Bond. I think there's such a perception of people that if you change anything, like in No Time to Die, No Time to Die made some really bold choices about, giving him a daughter, killing him. Big spoilers, I know, but and if you like the franchise, you would have watched it by now. Come on, let's be honest.
Exactly.
That film was the first film where you're like, people have such a perception of what Bond is. So for Bond to marry at the end of the film, you're like, that's not right. That's not right. And I think that's flawed massively. But in a time where they were taking chances, and with Lazenby, they signed him on for 7 more movies. They really had this idea that Lazenby was going to be the main future. I don't know what Bond would have looked like if he'd done 7 other movies. But it's really, really interesting. Really interesting the fact that there's a backing of that this is the James Bond looking like, and obviously that it did work out. And then Roger Moore went, I'll do them 7 for you.
Yeah. I mean, and it's just it's just not, there's no longevity to just getting a lookalike. That's why I can't whenever I hear Henry Cavill be suggested for the part, I go, that isn't Bond. Like, maybe he might look like a drawing of Bond, perhaps.
I mean,
but I don't think he doesn't have the range or the skill or the talent.
Can I jump on that for a second?
Yeah,
I'll jump on that for a second. I mean, okay, I'll be honest. I would have really loved to see Henry Cavill as James Bond because I mean, it'd be kind of cool to see him in that role. But honestly, okay, outside James Bond, I mean, he could. I mean, like he could do more like a Man from Uncle like
But that's the
franchise.
thing is he did the Man from Uncle
Guy
movie.
Ritchie.
And then he's doing another Guy Ritchie movie. So for him to be Bond would just be boring. He's already
I
treaded
think
on that territory. So to me, it would just like,
exactly.
there's no way that it would go where it would be even remotely interesting. It just wouldn't be, it wouldn't be a future worth having for the Bond franchise. It would be a
But
dead end from the get-go.
I mean, a lot of people are even jumping like, okay, because outside Henry Cavill, I have two more actors that I think like they would work as James Bond, but I want to hear your thoughts. So outside Henry Cavill, I think like Tom Hiddleston and even Idris Elba could have a shot.
I mean, Idris at this point has said he's uninterested in it. He's been suggested for it for so many years. He would be great. Like, don't get me wrong, Idris Elba would be great. He's too famous. Same with Hiddleston now. You
Yeah,
can't have someone that famous
yeah,
doing it.
that's tricky.
That's the benefit of Daniel Craig, was that when you watched him, you believed he was Bond. There was no extra baggage attached to it,
Yeah,
and that is necessary when casting big roles like that. I think with Bond, maybe, I mean, even though he's quite a big name, if you were to go in the Idris Elba sort of direction, I think Daniel Kaluuya would be brilliant.
hmm.
Maybe Riz Ahmed. Um, I think both
Riz
of them,
Ahmed.
yeah, they'd have a very interesting intensity and flavor to them that I think would add to that rawness, roughness of Bond.
That would
Uh,
actually, I'll be honest, like those are actually some pretty choices when
Thank
it
you.
comes to like, when it comes to James Bond. But I'll be honest, like even of all the actors that we mentioned, like, when it comes to the role of James Bond, like I'll be honest, like, if for example, they don't get the role and they get someone else, which I'll be honest, I will much prefer if it's like an unknown actor, like
Mhm.
more than a celebrity, which I do agree on that point, Noah. But I'll be honest, like I would still love to see like all those actors that we mentioned in a James Bond movie, like either as a
Mhm.
villain or as a supporting character. Like I mean, it would still be fun to see them.
It'd be pretty cool to see, like, it'd be fun to kind of reference the Idris Elba fan cast by having him cameo as the American Felix Leiter. And, like, that
That'd
could
be
be
cool.
kind of fun.
Like that'd be cool, but I feel like any direction that they might take Bond is almost like, oh god, I've got to like face up against Idris Elba now. Like he's gonna have to be like there with me. Like it's almost like, oh, I'm here with the cool guy. Yeah, Idris Elba's brilliant. Like he's
I
such
love
a
him.
cool guy.
Yeah, I love
Oh
he'd be
my
a great
god.
villain too. He said he'd be interested
Yeah,
in playing a Bond villain, and that would be really cool. I would totally go for
yeah.
that.
I mean, I'll be honest. Like, I remember, like, there was one story of James Bond that actually I wrote like few. I think it. Yeah, I wrote like a year and a half ago. Like, I think it was like over 200 pages. But basically, like, now my James Bond actually, which is why one of the reasons why I agree with you, it should be like older, is because in my story, James Bond is older. Like he's already a veteran, and basically, my story is set in China, basically, and the main villains. I don't know how. I mean, it was basically just two words put together, but like they're basically like crime lords. Like they have a really big like organization, basically like a, let's just say it's like triads 2.0
Mhm.
basically, and the villains are like two sisters basically, and I cannot believe this, I call them the Serpent Sisters.
I was waiting for you to say that was we're going to China and then Bond is going to be involved in like the Karate Kid film. The one in like Jaden Smith's Karate Kid film where like Bond just goes up and is like Jackie Chan said, "No, I'm going to fight you." And like that would be the
Yeah, but
serpent.
the thing is like
Oh
this
wow!
in my version, the Serpent Sisters, like one of them is like one of them is like she's like cool, like intelligent, like she has patience and everything, and the other one is like way more violent, basically. Like she like the one of the sisters, like she's like more into action, like blood and killing and everything, and the other one is like more like brain over brawn, basically. And I'm telling you, like the interactions I wrote for them, it's like crazy. Like it's like, oh my god, like I can't explain. Like it's like basically like crazy twin sisters, like basically going at it. Like, oh my god. But basically, my story it's involved like around like first part of it is drugs, and then like the last part is basically involves a new version of a nuclear weapon, basically. I mean, that's basically kind of like I'm giving you some elements of my story.
I see.
Basically.
Yeah, there's a bit of Thunderball, a bit of.
No, not exactly Thunderbolt. Not exactly Thunderbolt. It's more. It's not. Let's just say. I will say this: the weapon I created, it's not about explosion.
Mm-hmm.
It's about like how can I put this? A silent death version.
I getcha.
Yeah, but I'm so sorry. I'm just curious one thing. Like speaking of villains, which is also one of the things that James Bond is known for, like are the villains, But if I have to be honest, like I want to ask you to, like, if you have to name like top 5 your favorite Bond villains, like who would it be?
Now, would you like to go first? I'm just trying to like rack my brain in terms of.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I can do 5, but off the top of my head, I mean, I really love Goldfinger as a villain, and I think he's really relevant now. I think we see a lot of people like Auric Goldfinger in the news quite frequently. Running countries even. Woohoo. And
we get political on this episode.
Well, the story draws that attention to it too.
True, yeah.
It's one of those things where it's like he does have somewhat of like a bit of an oddly remarkable similarity to 2 figures in particular who are somewhat closely related. I think that I love Francisco Scaramanga. That's a great villain. I mean, especially as Christopher Lee portrays him. But the building blocks are all there in the book as well. And Silva in Spyfall was a really interesting kind of unexpected take on Scaramanga as well that I think is quite brilliant and adds a lot of layers to it. I'd love to see like Oscar Isaac do that part.
Oh.
Or like I Franco Nero would be really, really good as well for someone kind of older. I mean, Blofeld's a classic, but I'm very interested in like I'd be really interested in seeing new versions of Dr. No and Mr. Big to see how the kind of like things that are maybe a little bit more racist or handled or could be updated to kind of make the characters maybe a little more complex, less stereotypical, but like still culturally specific and interesting. I think those would be pretty interesting to see. Like get Tony Leung as Dr. No or Idris Elba as Mr. Big, and then you could have these kind of updated versions of them that could.
Yeah, I mean, like if you have to be honest, like Dr. No, like it was a time where basically like the actor who played Dr. No in the first movie ever, like I mean, you have to understand those were the days where Asian actors, there were not too many of them, so I kind of understand why they like cast a normal white actor instead of like an Asian. But I do agree with you, like if they have to bring Dr. No back again, this time make it accurate, like
yeah. I mean, there were tons of Japanese and Chinese actors who after the war were living in the UK and America, so they were there. They just weren't hired unless they were very stereotypical roles. But it would be nice to see those characters kind of given another shot with a little bit more respect.
Mm. And you?
Thank you. I thought you were going to go FRC because last time you said how much you love that. FRC. That's how you said Doctor No, I would say is definitely up there. I mean, obviously being the first, you sort of set a purposes for that. Also, I like the fact that we didn't see him very, very much in that film. It was towards the end that we got introduced. The villain in Thunderball, Emilio Largo, I think he was at the beginning of the very, very brutal villain. I did enjoy it. I think that fit that movie very well. Blofeld, yeah, I think you really with the shoehorned into them to die, which I just felt was a bit, he was good. It was almost a piece in terms of that movie, but I thought Spectre was. I thought he played that villain really, really well. Le Chiffre in Casino Royale, isn't it? Just that whole concept and that whole idea, and I think what really made that movie. I know I'm going to talk about it because it's like my favorite film. Post up there, but like that. What's the best part of them films and what really makes casino scene tense to watch is that standoff between Le Chiffre and Bond. The city position, but then the last two are really Felix, played by Jeffrey Wright, who was also he brought Bond back in to it, and he was just like, and he just sat there, was just like, yeah, I'm just in. Like you could tell, you could just like he had respect for the two guys. Just like, yeah, I'm done. Like that was great. One that's not spoken about in a movie I actually thought was pretty good. World Is Not Enough. That's played by Robert Carlyle. He was his character's name. It's Rhode Island. The World Is Not Enough. It was really, really good. In the better movies in terms of Pierce Brosnan. So yeah, it's really, really great. Some fantastic villains, and a good villain really heightens the movie because obviously the Bond characters, this is my fifth, this is my sixth film. Once you have a new villain, it feels a massive breath of fresh air, and they can really, really take that character in their own way.
Well, I have to say, both of you, you brought up really, really interesting choices when it comes to villains. If I have to honestly, if I have to choose my top five, I'll be quick. I would say Blofeld, Goldfinger, Silva, Alec Trevelyan, which is a villain that that I would say is an underrated villain. He's an underrated villain. Alec Trevelyan, and honestly, he surprised me. Even though a lot of people say he was all right, but he still surprised me in No Time to Die. And my fifth one is Safin. I think I think a lot of people. I mean, some people did say he's just another version of Dr. No. I would say yes and no. There was some elements similar, but he was still his own character, and he had his own motivation, his own desires, even the backstory, it made sense. And I mean, Rami Malek, he played him beautifully.
Oh, brilliant! Yeah, it was.
I liked the performance.
Brilliantly portrayed.
And the concept was quite interesting as well.
Yeah. And also, I would say this, when it comes to villains, there is one more, which again, he doesn't get too much credit, but from Tomorrow Never Dies, Elliot Craver. I think he's a type of villain that kind of shows the world what it is now, the media thing. He basically is that picture, and that's one of the reasons why I loved him. And also Price, he played him beautifully. Even he's an actor who can play really good villains.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was because again, I was mentioning earlier about the common perception of what a Bond, what Bond is. I think there's also that perception of a villain, and he was very, very different villain. They took in a very, very different direction, had very much different ideas, tried to do something different because obviously, again, at the time, the world of media was massively heightened in journalism and stuff like that. Again, one something I really love about it, it paid attention. So whilst it's not the most memorable, whilst it's not the one that you think of for the top of your head, and it was brilliantly portrayed by Jonathan Pryce, as Lord of Shadows mentioned, it almost does feel a little bit like, yeah, but that's not the Bond villain we want. But if you actually really scale back and look at the character in the time it came out, it was almost the best villain to choose for in terms of a cultural sense.
Absolutely, and I think that's the way that Bond villains got to go. I think we've all got to like it's said in Hamlet, you've got to hold a mirror up to nature and show time his own look and scorn his own image. You know, the purpose of creating art is to represent your own time. And that's one of the great things about Bond as a franchise and why it's been able to reinvent itself every few years, is because it has that as its great benefit. And so when I hear people go, well, let's do a Cold War one, it's like, well, we're kind of having a modern Cold War in a way. Why don't we make use of that instead? That's way more interesting than doing like a nostalgia fest set in the 60s. Our culture shouldn't just be eating itself up through this for the sake of nostalgia. Like, what's nostalgia other than something we've kind of made up to deal with our own relationship with time? Shouldn't we be more interested in what our world looks like now and how we can reinvent culture for our own time? Bond does give an interesting framework for that. And I've got to leave in a second, but the last thing I'll say is I'd really recommend. I mean, Kieran, if you haven't, you mentioned you have a love of spy novels.
Yes.
If you haven't already, I can't recommend the books of John le Carre enough. Especially The Spy Who Came In From the Cold and Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy are two of my favorite books I've ever read.
Yeah.
And to me, those stories are very archetypically perfect spy stories in a way that like you do rarely see outside of what Fleming managed to accomplish. And yeah, those are kind of my closing thoughts before I've got to go. But
Fantastic.
yeah.
Oh, are we clapping? I didn't know we were clapping. That's brilliant.
Yes, give
I
me
missed
the
the memo
applause.
on
Yeah. All right, well, have a good one, fellas. I'll talk to you later.
Oh, see
Thank
you
you for
later.
having me
See you
on.
very soon.
Yeah, see you. Bye-bye.
Wow.
Well, FRC.
There you go. I knew you'd love to say that.
Looks like we're on our own now.
We are. It
Well,
looks like we are.
yeah. I mean, I just want to like go like with the villains a little bit more, like because
course.
I'll be honest with you, because like when it comes to I think like almost everyone else, I think like I grew up with the James Bond movies, you know, and I started like reading the novels when I was in college, which is basically like a few years back, and the very two novels I read were The Man with the Golden Gun, and also I think Doctor No.
Yeah.
Or was it Goldfinger? Okay, I know, I don't remember right now.
He
But
loves the gold. He loves the gold.
exactly. But but I'm not sure if it was like Doctor No, or I think it was Doctor No. I think it was Doctor No, because I do have like found out that, for example, you know how in the old movie Doctor No had those like mechanical arms.
Yeah.
In the book, he actually had like hooks for arms, not like mechanical ones. Mm-hmm. That's the, hmm.
Books and of that, and also technology has that advantage. If you make a Doctor No film again, if you were going to decide to could that inclusion from the books be linked to the technology and sort of a bigger budget? But I do think it's one of the interesting things is that there are certain Bond movies that link very, very closely to Ian Fleming's novels. One of the big things I really enjoyed about, and this is an actor I mentioned yet, is that were dark, they were brutal, but they were so linked to the James Bond novels that Ian Fleming wrote. That risk in terms of then them two movies. License to Kill was the only 15 rated certificate film of any franchise. That's the only 15 day. So I do think that like you said with the Doctor No, little perception of they're also one film.
Yeah, I understand completely. I do understand, and I'll be honest. Like, okay,
So I want.
I'm sorry. Like, your picture, your picture froze, so I didn't know like if you were still talking or not. Like now.
No, I just wanted to sort of interesting topic, which I think will be quite interesting. Obviously, they only did sort of a couple of films. Craig, Brosnan, Moore, and Connery. The best and worst from in sort of time order. So, what would be the best and James Bond?
Wait, just a moment. Just a moment. I didn't quite hear what you said because like that your picture is freezing.
Okay. No, I was just so the best and the worst Bond film from from
Mm. I'm sorry again. Like because
now.
it's still shaky.
Is it still now? Just saying about the sort of James Bond film, Sean Connery. What would you say?
So what was like the worst and best Sean Connery movies?
James Bond.
Just a moment. Okay. Okay, I'm just checking because, like I said, your picture is like freezing, like over and over and over and over, and so like I wasn't quite sure like when you were talking or not. Mm-hmm. Right. Hmm.
I'm still here.
Okay. Okay. Now it looks fine. So could you repeat your question this time?
Yeah. So, in terms of the Bond films, so Sean Connery's Bond films, what would you say is the best and the worst from him?
Oh, that's a hard one.
It is a hard one because he's made some great ones.
Yeah, I mean, I would say this: the best one for me, I would definitely go with Goldfinger. The worst, oh my god, because I mean, I love all of them equally, but if I have to choose, oh my god, uh, oh well, I mean, if I have to choose, I would say probably it's Diamonds Are Forever.
Yeah, I think the strained relationship between the producers and Connery was most definitely, came with the product. Was Connery a little bit too old when he made the movie and sort of played Bond? Potentially in terms of the action sequences, the potential he had with them. So yeah, I'd probably agree with I probably agree with them. Also, because no Bond has there's been a movie in between. What about Roger Moore? Moving swiftly on to Roger Moore, what would you say? Because I mean, for me, Die, his first film, I would say, just because it was just a breath of fresh air, and Roger Moore was the comedic Bond, the one that did more comedy essence into it. I think that he was very still reminiscent of Connery in terms of the brutality, and I thought the villains were great in that one. So I'd say that's probably the best for me.
For me, I would say Roger Moore's like James Bond. I would say for me the best. I'm gonna go with like the Man with the Golden Gun.
Yeah, I love that one. Not a lot of people like that one, but I love that one.
For me personally, one of the biggest reasons why I love the Man with the Golden Gun is not just because of Roger Moore, but because of Christopher Lee. The way how he played the way how he played Francisco Scaramanga, like he played him perfectly. Like because the thing is, when I read the Man with the Golden Gun, I agree with Christopher Lee. Like when he was talking, like the Francisco Scaramanga in the books, like he's in the book, sorry, he's basically a thug. He's basically like a villain slash thug who does like all these kills for money and everything. But Christopher Lee, like he gave him charm, he gave him like intelligence, he gave him like more to his character. Like he made, for me personally, he made the character complete, and that's one of the reasons why I love the Man with the Golden Gun. Just for me personally.
Yeah, I like the Golden Gun. I do think towards the end of my whole time as Bond, I would say that it was, the age in terms of, the potential I think he potentially had. I don't also, View to a Kill was not the best, but I do think personally that he should have set that.
Mm.
Um, there's well, I probably mentioned a lot, but I thought this, especially what would you say?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you quite well. What did you say?
I said, what would you say was the weakest Roger Moore film?
Let me think. Because again, like Sean Connery, Roger Moore, and Daniel Craig, alongside Pierce Brosnan, they're like my favorite James Bonds. So like I really like all of them equally. But if I have to choose like Roger Moore's weakest, let me think. Oh God. Ooh. Oh fuck. I would say. I mean, I will say this. I think like I would say is a tie for me personally between what was the name? I think for me personally, it's a tie between A View to Kill and For Your Eyes Only.
Yeah, For Your Eyes Only for me as well. It was not memorable. Like,
Yeah,
seriously, like it's the latest one I would. There's so many other movies that I would want to rewatch, and that one I was like, I sort of need to rewatch it because I haven't watched it in a while. But it almost is that sort of like I don't really want to. It was like that. I was like, I don't really want to rewatch this one. It was just almost sort of like, okay, that's fine. Finally, and actually not funny because we've still got Craig's, but Brosnan. Because for me, Brosnan is one of them where it's like a roller coaster. I view Pierce Brosnan's Bond films as a roller coaster, and it's a very good roller coaster because you go up, you go down, and stuff like that. It's a great roller coaster, but in terms of movies, not the best. GoldenEye for me, that first Bond film with him in, Sean Bean, Xenia on a top as well. Like the Brosnan just was so cool in the style. I'd say that was probably my favorite.
For this one, I will have to go on board with you. Like even for me, my personal favorite when it comes to Brosnan is GoldenEye. Like even like for me, that movie like the story, Pierce Brosnan's version of James Bond, Alec Trevelyan played by Sean Bean like as the villain, like everything for me was great when it comes to GoldenEye. You know, also before we go to the worst Pierce Brosnan James Bond, I just want to say, like, of all the actors in James Bond movies, the one I have to really give credit to is like the guy who played Q all the way till Pierce Brosnan's James Bond.
Desmond Llewellyn. Desmond
Ex-
Llewellyn. He was
and and the
he's
crazy
so
thing
good.
is, I mean, God rest his soul. The crazy thing is, he could have still played him if it wasn't for that car crash.
Yeah. Yeah, I still think he would now. I still think he would now. The best bit of him in it, he was always through every single Bond movie, for all of the Bond movies, he was that he stayed that Q character stayed the same, and it was the Bond actor who decided to change up the style and the genre and the way he wanted to play him. But the best bit was when Piers Brosnan James Bond was going down the and he stole Q's retirement gift, like the boat. And I just think that was just really cool. It was just like, oh my god. But also, I do think Ben Whishaw, who plays you in the Daniel Craig film, really take that style on, and there's some great comedic moments between them. But no, Desmond Llewellyn will always be a Bond legend for what he did every single time. He just played that character exactly the same, but didn't need to have. It wasn't forced to change because of the way the film going. He was brilliant. He was really,
Yeah,
really good. I really
yeah.
did enjoy him.
Yeah. I mean, like there have been so many changes when it comes to like James Bond, to M, to like everybody, but like Q remained the same one, and for that, like you have to give the guy respect. Like he played him until the end, and it's such like for me personally, like I mean, Winshaw, like who played Q in Daniel Craig's movies, like he was good. Okay, I would even go as far as say like even John Cleese as like Q,
Yeah,
even he was good. But for me personally, the main man will be like Q forever. Like
yeah,
he for me will always be Q. Now I want to ask you first, like which
Well,
is your worst Pierce Brosnan James Bond movie?
I've got it briefly, like in terms of this whole sort of in terms of the show, but I understand why they did it. I understand why they did it. I think it was once again paying, I keep repeating this, but it paid attention to the changes in society and obviously, the
Mm.
real
Well, I mean, I get you. I get you.
guy.
Yeah, I mean, like even for me personally, like if I have to choose, like the if I
Also, I
what?
that was really, really painful.
Hmm. Looks like we have some technical difficulties. Okay.
What about you? What about you?
Hmm. I think like you know what? When it comes to Pierce Brosnan, I think like I have to go with like even though, again, I enjoy his movies for what they are. Like I really really do. But if I have to choose, like for me, the weakest, I think like it has to be Die Another Day. That's just me.
So Craig's, I've already spoke. Casino Royale is, and I absolutely, as in, yeah, because I mean, Skyfall was brilliant. No Time to Die was brilliant. And Quantum of Solace is my weakest. I'll reveal that now, but that's Daniel Craig.
Like when it comes to me, I mean, I get ya, like when it comes to your choices and everything, I get ya. But for me personally, like if I had to choose the best, I mean, a lot of people will say like this is not true. Like people will give me like reasons why it's not the best. But like for me, my number one like best Daniel Craig James Bond will be Spectre. Like
Yeah.
I mean, the way how they introduced the organization, the way how Christoph Waltz played like this version of Blofeld. Like I mean, if I have to choose like of all the versions of Blofeld there were, I have to choose. I have to say Christoph Waltz version is my favorite.
Yeah.
He's my favorite Blofeld, and the way how he played him, he was great. Monica Bellucci, like everything in Spectre for me, even like Mr. White, not Mr. White. What was Dave Bautista's name?
Jinx.
Mr. Jinx, right? Or Mr. Hinks?
Yeah. Hinks, Jinx. Yeah.
Anyway, something like that. Even like that fight on the train that like Dave Bautista and like Daniel Craig had, like which is also one of the well-known fights where basically Daniel Craig broke his leg, but like and also he broke Dave Bautista's nose. But yeah, I mean, like Spectre is my favorite one, and like if I had to choose like my weakest, I think it has to be Quantum Solace. He has to be Quantum Solace, the weakest.
But again, and why we said about Sean Connery earlier, he is Bond in terms of what Bond is, but Daniel Craig is my favorite James Bond because I grew up with him in terms of his role. It's my favorite film. He's got him in, and I think that every of his took different sort of and I can't. Can you talk in if there's any? Do you have instances with it? Because personally, for me, like one of my favorite movies is when you sit down and I watch it and I go, I'm not sure what I can pick wrong with this film, and I think that's why people say that is my favorite film, because you can ultimately say, would you say there's any negative in Casino Royale? Would you say? You're going to crush my dreams here, Mr. Shadows, but you are our council leader, so you can do.
Okay, first, repeat the question because I didn't hear you. I didn't hear you quite well, and then we will talk.
Okay, are there any negatives to 2006's Casino Royale for you? Would you say any negative?
Honestly, I don't have negatives about Casino Royale.
Yes. Oh, amazing! That's brilliant. That's made my evening.
No, I mean seriously, like I really don't have any negatives. Like maybe my only negative is like to have a little bit more screen time or with Le Chiffre, but like anything else, like for me was great. So I really don't have any negatives when it comes to Casino Royale.
Oh, brilliant. That's made my night. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for listening. Goodbye. I'm done now. It's definitely fantastic. I'll ask you the big question. Who is your favourite Bond girl? Put it up.
Oh my God.
Hard. It's very, very hard. There's a lot of nice Bond women.
Honestly, like, yeah, I mean, again, like, there was a lot of great, like, James Bond girls. Well, actually, women. I mean, oh my God, it's really a hard one. I mean, even Grace Jones, like, even she was, like, great, when she played one of the henchmen of Christopher Walken's villain. Like, Grace Jones, like, even she was great as a Bond girl. But if I have to choose my favorite girl, it's really sounds so weird with the way I said it. But if I have to choose, you know what? I think I have to go with Vesper Lynn, Evergreen.
Yeah. She's brilliant. Like and again, it's gonna feel like this is just a Casino Royale episode. But in terms of that Bonga, what I really, really liked was that I keep rewatching the film. Every single time you watch it, if you pick up on a character, she's such a hard Bond girl who, it can stick up for herself, but you can really, really tell with confrontation and emotion. She had a real emotion to Bond. Every single time Bond was in trouble, every time Bond was struggling, she struggled with it. That scene on the stairwell, and Bond goes to his room in the shower. And it almost sort of feels like she constantly sort of, I don't want to be involved in conflict. And you really see that sort of human side of her. And then when Bond was playing, Bond was after the torture scene with Le Chiffre, and then that line of saying, you've got your armor back on for an hour left. It was so happy that he said, "So I don't want to. I love you. I don't want you in conflict." And then that twist at the end, where she's like, "How can you? You are one of the villains." And to do that, I just thought was that an amazing twist. And she's a great one. Leia Seydoux as well, I think, has got to get a shout out. Big shout out, because she was the only Bond girl to really ground him. And he kept pushing her away, but she still found a way to stay in his life, because she had just as them demons as Bond did. Before interesting way of putting it.
But if I I mean, I totally agree with everything what you said. But if I have to, honestly, for me personally, if someone asks me like, who is your favorite Bond woman who is like a badass, I have to go with Gracie Jones.
Yeah.
I mean, like in that movie where she played like Christopher Walken's like henchman, like she was a badass.
She was scary.
Exactly.
She scared me. Like,
she was a scary woman, and I really liked her, and like it really balances like Christopher Walken's villain.
Yeah, because Christopher Walken's villain was just like chilling at the horse racing, betting his money on the horses, and she was like, "I'll sort that out." And you're like, "Brilliant! Like, I'm gonna go back to my horses." Like that was a really good. That was a really good one.
Yeah, and also I have to say, like, one of the I do remember like one of the criticism when it comes to James Bond villains in general is that a lot of people have always bullshit James Bond movies because the villains always have like a very small amount of screen time, but even if you look at the books, that's the same thing what Ian Fleming did, like even that in the books, the villains had a small amount of screen time, even though a lot of people say like, oh, I wish Safin had like, more screen time. I'm like, it's James Bond. Of course it's going to have like more screen time.
I think we obviously touched on that earlier when Noah was here about Safin. I think the reason why that was the way it was is because Rami Malek is still a big name, but I think he was coming off of his Oscar win. I think a lot of people's perception is that villain is going to be dead, and when different direction, different people appreciated that scene in the film, which is he goes over the ice. I just thought was brilliant. Like that was a cool scene, the mask, and then I think it started off at such a high. You sort of slowly went down. That scene when he's got the daughter, in his arms and gets him to do yoga. I think Bond to do like some sort of meditation. Like that his scene. And I think a lot of people expect that, like you said, Bond villains might not have loads of screen time, but what they do on screen is the most important. I mentioned Steve earlier with the casino scene. That worked. That made the Silver with the scene when Bond is tied up and you see him for the first time, and then he then goes and shoots the whiskey off the girl's head.
Mm-hmm.
But villains don't need to be in the movie constantly. I mean, I'm going to make a comparison to a franchise we both love, the MCU. The villains are constantly throughout the story, and you know exactly about their art. Bond villains, you need a villain, but if they're in there, but even if they have one great scene, if they have one great moment, that is your villain. That is your villain, and I love that. I love that absolutely. I think and Grace Jones was a great one because she was just such a badass. Xenia on a top. Got to put her in the mix as well. I mean, she was ruthless.
Also, let's not forget like one of the most cult-like iconic villains, Jaw.
We haven't mentioned him. I'm surprised it took that long, an hour and a Jaws. I did mention Jaws earlier. I did compare myself to Jaws because you were made a nice. I thought I should get involved, but Jaws was great. Like Jaws was great.
Exactly. I mean, like if you look at closely, like he was like one of the first like characters you can actually consider like a supervillain, basically.
Yeah. In 1977, he was in Moonraker, who was inspired of me. So that was a year prior to 1978, which a lot of people would say that kicked off the superhero. I know we had the Batman 66 film, but they were very whatever. That was so fun as though enjoyed it. But Superman, I would say 78 was the big, was the big start. So Lev said he was probably. I will tell you a quick story actually about Jaws, which is quite funny. So my family's a big sort of Bond fans and stuff like that. But my sister is, just a typical film watcher. Just a sort of watcher. She'll watch what she wants. She actually was in a row with me and really enjoy it. I was watching Moonraker because that's the last Bond film with Jaws in when he meets the girl. So my sister came in and I was looking at showing like the smile with his sort of metal teeth. And he's like, obviously then with the girl, he smiled, and my sister was like, why is he got a love interest in the film? I don't know. She's like, why have you got a love interest in this film? I was just like, he needs something, Gareth. That's my sister's name, Carrie. She went, oh, you need something. He needs some sort of interest. But yeah, that was brilliant.
Oh yeah, definitely. Oh my god. I mean, but I will be honest here. Like, one of the things that kind of really got on my nerve is that the constant recasting of Blofeld.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, okay, I will say this: From Russia with Love, I cannot accuse of anything because, like, they kept Blofeld as a mystery, until he was revealed. I get it, but like from Donald Pleasance all the way to like Max von Sydow, basically, they recasted him over and over and over and over again. I'm like, I mean, Donald Pleasance, like for a Sean Connery like villain, like Sean Connery's Blofeld, why didn't they kept him until Diamonds Are Forever? Because like his portrayal of Blofeld was actually when it comes to that era was actually the perfect one.
I think it was because of the sort of the relationship I think broke down. So when I think his first film was it you on Your Majesty's Secret Service? That was the first time, or no? It was You Only Live Twice. You Only Live Twice.
Yes.
Yeah.
That was that was the movie where basically Blofeld officially appeared on screen. But if you're gonna count like his official appearance, then it would be basically From Russia with Love.
Yeah. So I think that was also really interesting. Well, I think that they could have, like you said, they could have carried on until Diamonds Are Forever. The sort of mysterious figure that was always, like, who is it? Like, he keeps popping up in every single film. Like, who is he? And then, but I say, You Only Live Twice is that will be a line that I always love. It said, they told me you're assassinated. He said, Mr. Bond, they told me you're assassinated in Hong Kong. He said, yes, this is my second life. And he went, you only live twice, Mr. Bond. Like, that is just brilliant. Like, that is that's a really, really good line.
Also, I mean, I'll be honest with you. Like, when it comes to Blofeld, like, especially like if you look at like from like Sean Connery and even like Roger Moore, like Blofeld, I never understood that suit that he was wearing. The kind of like gray military suit, like, because it didn't fit him. Basically,
no, I didn't. Yeah. I would have liked sort of like a suit, in terms of like a suit and tie and stuff like that. Somewhere where you'd walk in and you just go like, he's the man. Like, he's the man. But obviously make it very different to Bond because that was his attire. But I can just imagine him being in a 3-piece suit, black tie, just coming, just when you're the boss. Like, it didn't add anything to the character for me.
Yeah, I mean that's why I was basically more concentrated on like the actor and the face, basically. Like, that was concentrated more on that. But but also, I mean, I have to be honest. If I have to like before I saw You Only Live Twice, I kind of imagine like Blofeld that he will be in his suit, basically. But I don't know why, but I imagine it to be like more greenish than black.
Yeah,
I don't know why. I don't know why, but basically, I always kind of imagine.
Is green a villainous color for you? Is green a villainous color for you? Is that why you went for that?
No, for me, it's purple.
Yeah, purple. There we go. Love that. Okay, here's another question. As a relatively small man, I'm only I know I don't look like here, but I am only I'm 5'5", 5'5". So I'm a very small man. But so I could get away with playing a very small Bond villain, but the best small Bond villain, as you are the main villain, man. Do you go knick-knack or do you go odd job?
Knick-knack or one job?
Odd job.
Oh,
The
odd job.
Goldfinger. Yeah, the
Oh,
Goldfinger.
I thought you said one job. I was like, one job. What the hell?
That could be my Bond villain. If I ever get casted, I could be called One Job.
Knick-knack or odd job?
It's the battle of the small people in Bond franchises.
Yeah. If I have to choose, you know what? I'm gonna go with odd job
Yeah,
because he had
yeah.
more style.
He did have more style. Also, that hat was just ridiculously deadly. Like seriously, like I'd love to see that like a death certificate, death by hat.
I'll be honest with you. Like I want to tell you a story. There's like an Italian parody of Goldfinger. It's called Gold Ginger, basically, and like yeah, it's called Gold Ginger, and basically
brilliant. That's so good. That's
yeah,
brilliant.
and basically like the James Bond of that story is basically like you have these two like Italian comedians who are like their names are Ciccio and Franco, and basically they're like the James Bond of the story, both of them. Like one of them is like trying to be smart and the other one is like crazy, like, and stupid. But basically like the Odd Job parody, you know how he's called? Do you have any guesses?
No. I'm waiting. I'm anticipating this.
Okay, so Goldfinger, Odd Job. Gold Ginger, Bollock.
Only the Italians. Like that's brilliant. We managed to. No, that's brilliant. That's absolutely brilliant. I might actually research that just to see.
Yeah, I mean, like the movie is like
I'll never watch Goldfinger again, thanks to this show now. Like
yeah,
the
but
same way again.
one more fact that I was actually really surprised in Goldfinger was actually I didn't realize that the actor who played Goldfinger was dubbed.
Yes.
I didn't know that. I felt like that was actually his voice. Then I realized that he was actually dubbed, and the only time he spoke English was when he was like demonstrating Fort Knox.
Yeah, and he had to. Yeah, he had to.
Because
Yeah,
I read somewhere that because he's like his knowledge of English was like very small.
yeah, very miniature. Yeah, very minor. Yeah.
I was like, wow. I
It's
was
really,
really
really cool.
surprised.
It's really cool to like look at the behind the scenes because you've got so much. Like now, in newer franchises, it's all filmed, it's all made into another production. But I've actually got a James Bond encyclopedia, and I've read that multiple times. Just generally, just trying to pick up the facts, like pick up like little things, and and little facts because you almost sort of feel like in them times, it was only very, very exclusive to the production and stuff like that. Nowadays, anybody can sort of record something or anybody can make a story up. We hear so much, news and stuff like about it. It's almost really, really nice to sort of look back at this franchise all the way in the 60s and find them sort of little hidden gems of information where you just go, really? And also, I think it changes your interpretation of the film and, the way it is. So, I absolutely love, I keep saying it, but I absolutely love James Bond, and that's will always be me. Where, I think the representation of British culture, and also knowing that there are people out there in the shadows like him, and you want to be like him, you want to be that cool guy. And I think he just really is. He's a staple of cinema. There's a lot of franchises that come and go. There's a lot of franchises that finish and conclude, and some are celebrated, some are not, some are well respected, some aren't. But Bond is carried on. We're in the 61st year, and it shows no sign of slowing down. Even though the ending of No Time to Die, it's still going on. Who's the next Bond? Are you gonna make it a woman? Are you gonna make it a man or a woman of color? Every single time we keep talking about this franchise, and you're thinking, do we not need to stop them now? And everybody's like, no, we do not. We're going to carry on moving forward, and that's what's special about it.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, you have to also remember that the James Bond, not just simply with the movies, but like even with the novels, like
Yeah,
he started this like spy world era. Like with like not simply with the classic villains, like the behavior, like mysterious mastermind with the cat thing. Like no, not just simply that. Like with like even like the martini, like shaken but not stirred. Like not even with that. Like but also even like with the gadgets. Like
yeah.
the gadgets, like the vehicles, like the action, the type of storytelling, like James Bond started everything because I said at the beginning we had like so many different franchises. We had like the Avengers, we had the Man from Uncle, we had like Kingsman, we had so many different like franchises, but none of them are like close what like James Bond was like because James Bond was like the very beginning of everything, you know.
It's the very beginning of everything, and that's what I really like is that it never tries to be something different.
No,
The Mission Impossible movies are great, and I really really enjoy them. But you almost think, well, that was in the 90s. So the 90s action movies, you're going to take inspiration from that. There's always a source. There's always a starting point. And
indeed.
every single time that in any franchise, in any genre, you've got the guys at the top. You've got the franchise and the series and of movies at the top, and that's exactly what Bond is for the spy genre. But it's carried on and maintained that it's not stopped. Where and then like right now you can take over. We've obviously got the
Hmm.
Bourne movies, the Mission Impossible movies. And it's almost just ran side by side with that and just gone, yeah, well, we can keep up with you. We can keep up with you. And
Yeah, I mean
that's
like
what's really exciting.
like you have to remember that it's another franchise that a lot of people are like, wait, what? Like there are two franchises that actually they're kind of were also inspired by James Bond. Like I mean the overall style. I mean some people will say like they were inspired by many things, but if you look at the basics, like it is inspired by James Bond. I don't know if you ever saw those TV shows, but they're basically animation. Like one of them is like it's called Totally Spies, where like you have like this.
I've heard of it. Yeah.
Yeah, so
Yeah. I've heard of it.
basically those like you have like those three girls basically who are like, I think they were like in college or high school, I'm not quite sure, but basically like like the villains, the storytelling, their boss, like basically like there's a lot of James Bond vibe in that. And also Kim Possible. Like even
Yeah.
Kim Possible was like inspired by James Bond. Like like again, like the types of villains, like the gadgets and everything. I mean, like, okay, like there's a lot of villains who were like actual super villains, but like for example, like you have villains like Senior, or like Dr. Draken, which I kind of love to say that he's like a crazier version of Dr. No. But like you have so many different franchises that were inspired by James Bond. Like even like remember when Matthew Wong first time created Kingsman, he did say like he
Yeah.
wanted to create a franchise on his own that basically is on the same level as James Bond.
And Roger Moore's James Bond films, because
Exactly.
what happened in the Kingsman was it took massive inspiration from the quirkiness and
Mm-hmm.
perception, but still made it its own. And what I think was really really great from the Kingsman movies is that you've got that main franchise, and then to do the prequel, The Kingsman, which was a completely different sort of style, and and in which he directed that film as well. So he took it in a very different way. But we've never had a prequel. We've never had a prequel in the Bond franchise. We've had a sequel because Quantum of Solace is technically a sequel to Casino Royale because it picks up straight from that. And the Bond films in Daniel Craig's are all interlinked together with these all of the villains very much figurehead to Spectre, because at the time of Daniel Craig's films, they didn't have the rights to Spectre.
Mm-hmm.
To the Spectre, which was crazy. But it does almost feel like, you could, of course, take inspiration, you can take, themes and ideas, but actually seeing that so clearly in other projects almost just shows that the film community respects exactly what they're doing, and it's an event. The Bond films are an event. When you're waiting for a poster. What's this next Bond film going to be called? You're waiting for who's the the musician. There's some fantastic songs, theme songs from Bond, and it
Oh
wasn't
my god, the
massive
soundtracks.
soundtracks are just brilliant. So you're waiting for that news. Who's going to be your next one? Shirley Bassey. The
Oh,
three Bond themes. 3 Bond themes. What an incredible moment for a musician to introduce their style into the Bond films.
Yeah.
And there's been some really, really massive names. Very recently with Adele, Billie Eilish, which Billie Eilish is one. I was a little bit. I'll be honest with you. I was very nervous when I heard that Billie Eilish was making it. I like Billie Eilish's music, but I thought, is this going to work? And No Time to Die, as soon as it was released, I was like, wow. Because she changed her style and the way she releases music into the Bond film.
Yep.
Alicia Keys and Jack White's one for Quantum of Solace I thought was great. Aha was as well. Like, my dad loves that band, so he was like, yes, that's really like he consistently listens to that for them films and stuff like that. And I think Goldfinger's got to be the one though. I know we keep repeating Goldfinger is a film, but that theme song, as soon as that first note hits and the opening credits start going, you're like, let's do this. Like, I'm ready. It gets you ready for a Bond film. The same way, as soon as the Marvel logos, Marvel Studios logos hit, you're ready for a Marvel movie. That's your focus. A long time ago, the galaxy far, far away, you're ready for a Star Wars film. And for Bond films, for me, there's some really great opening scenes, but a Bond film starts as soon as that the Bond actor walks, he shoots the gun, the blood comes down, and you're in. And that's what
if you go, even if whenever they decide to change, whenever they decide which actor will be the next James Bond, and whichever direction they go, like when it comes to story wise, characters and everything, the one thing I know that they will never change, and that is like the beginning, like when he's walking, shooting the blood, like that is the symbol of James Bond. Like, you can remove that. You can't.
If you remove it, it'll be crazy. I mean, I remember.
Yeah.
By the way, and I know we're sort of talking about the franchises here, but Rogue One is the best new modern Star Wars movie in my opinion. But the one thing that they didn't do was they didn't do the music in Rogue One.
Yeah, I mean the music, I will agree. The music was like it wasn't great, but it was like okay.
Yeah, well, a lot of people were like very disappointed that the whole text and the music didn't start playing. But if you did that in a Bond film, if you missed that out in a Bond film, people would just go mental. People would just be like, "Are you having a laugh? Like, what are you doing?"
I want to ask you something.
Go on.
I want to ask you something. I mean, I don't think he'll do it, especially when it comes to his age. But could you see John Williams score James Bond?
Yes. Because that's the only franchise he's not done. Like, that's the only
yes.
That's the only franchise where you would think that like a John Williams score would be there. My ultimate dream, and this is something which but everybody has dreams, don't they, Mr. Shadows? Everybody has dreams. Everybody has what they would want. I would like Steven Spielberg direct, John Williams with the score. And it would just be the best Bond movie to have the greatest director of all time direct a James Bond film. Just mind blowing. I mean, I know that's not going to happen. I know that's not going to happen, but it would just be amazing.
I mean, I'm trying to imagine like the score from John Williams, Steven Spielberg's direction. I mean, don't be wrong. I do believe Steven Spielberg could direct a James Bond movie because because there's a lot of like dramas and like serious movies that he did, and like and even though most of them like didn't had like James Bond type of action, but like the style, the tone
would be crazy.
I mean, I could see him do like a James Bond movie. I mean, I could definitely see him. I know that there's a lot of people who will say like, no, like Steven Spielberg is not fit for it. But I mean, again, it all depends like if he will be interested. But
but I think
that he could do it.
We spoke about a more sort of veteran. I think Spielberg can bring that style because he's done it in so many other movies where he's worked with particularly older actors. where I think he could really lean into that perception of this world. I think there's so much potential for a really good film, but I just think that if the kid in me would just like be there, like jumping up and down in my seat, just waiting for the film to come out, because you are linking together so many incredible creative minds. But your
Yeah.
original question was John Williams. If John Williams has to do a Bond score, if he does a Bond score, I just no, I would literally listen to that on repeat. It'd be crazy.
I mean, yeah. I mean, like I said, because of all the composers that were like part of like the James Bond franchise. I mean, like I still think like John Williams, which by the way, I just want to say this: John Williams officially announced that he's not retiring. Like he's gonna still compose things.
Yeah.
Uh, and I'm like, I mean, even though I'm like, okay, great, like it's great to see the great legend back, but like, dude, you're like in your 90s, so like I think you deserve some vacation. Like, I mean, you had a long career. Like, we don't want you basically like trying to compose, and then like all of a sudden, I mean, I'm wishing I'm wishing him all well and everything. But like we don't want to just be like him like going like this, and then all of a sudden
Yeah,
like
exactly. Like,
falling while directing.
what a career! Yeah, what a career he's had in terms of it. But my worry is that he will stop. But why would you if you're that good at what you do? It's crazy, and it almost does feel like the Bond that have always took risks. They've always they've particularly took risks in who they cast and stuff like that. But they'll always look at it and just go, let's put a big name. If you have a big name in a Bond film, you'll be like, oh my god, like
Oh
already
yeah.
established. Like I can't remember I was 3 when they announced Daniel Craig as Bond, so I can't really remember it. But the backlash against that was crazy. But they've
Yeah,
took
I mean, I
risks.
do. Yeah, I do remember. I do remember like the backlash that Daniel Craig had for being cast as James Bond. But serious. But the one thing I was so smiling, I was so happy, is that when Casino Royale came out, I was like in your fucking faces, like now Daniel Craig like
I
showed
think
everyone
he
that
had a
he's a
chip on his
great James
shoulder.
Bond.
He had a chip on his shoulder, and I think there was that
Exactly.
perception.
And also one of the reasons why I love Daniel Craig's James Bond, like his movies, because if you look at closely, like none of the actors like who play James Bond, none of them had like a well connected stories. They were
Yeah,
all like stories separately. Like like one time From Russia with Love was his own thing. Goldfinger was his own thing. GoldenEye was his own thing. But Daniel Craig actually had a well connected story between all the movies, and like he had a beginning, a middle, and an end. And that's one of the reasons why Daniel Craig's James Bond movies for me are great, because they
yeah.
had one big story.
When I watched No Time, I watched it in IMAX. I absolutely, and that just heightened my experience. I was so pleasantly surprised to see that link with Vesper in it when he went to a grave, and that was brilliant. So I'm really, really intrigued and really, really was massive intrigued to see where that was, but that showed his mindset that Vesper was the only Bond girl I think he really truly loved in his films. But the links with the villains, there's so many. We still haven't spoke about M, dying in Skyfall. Like
Yeah,
that was a big shock. Every single Daniel Craig film revealed something surprising and something shocking. It took risks, and I'm not saying that they got away with it, but they almost felt like that was their unique selling point, is that you go into a Bond movie, forget everything you think of Bond at the door, because we might be making some big changes, and they consistently did that with Craig's 5 films. So I will be back. Our fearless leader is going to hold down the fort. I will be back.
right. Let him go do his business, and I hope he'll be back very very soon. But yeah, like before he comes here, like yeah, I mean like just like with all the franchises I grew up with, like even even one of them, I have to admit, was James Bond. And like almost everyone else, I just loved I just love this world of spying. in general. It's kind of talking to myself. I'm kind of hoping that he'll be back soon. Mm-hmm.
There we go.
And here we are again. Anyway, yeah, I mean, like the one thing that where we stopped is like basically we were talking about M, and I agree. I mean, like I'll be honest, like when it comes to of all the M's that were like in like James Bond movies, like I had to be honest, like the ones that really got my attention were literally Judi Dench and Ralph Fiennes.
Yeah,
as M's, like because I mean, don't be wrong, all the M's that were like in those movies, like they were fine, but for me they were like there was nothing in them. You basically they were like bosses who were like saying James Gunn, James Gunn, James Bond, like okay.
James Gunn's popular at the moment. James Gunn's popular at the moment.
Oh yeah, very popular indeed. But like basically, in all the movies, he was basically like okay, James Bond, like here's the file of these people, here's the file about the mission, go.
Yeah.
That's basically it. Like there was no emotional connection. There was no real character development, basically, But with Judi Dench and Ralph Fiennes, like you had that. You had that. Even like when she was introduced in Pierce Brosnan, like James Bond, like even from that, like you had felt her presence. Like you felt that version of M, just like with Ralph Fiennes as well.
I think the dynamic between Judi Dench and Daniel Craig was better than what we got from the Bond movies. Pierce Brosnan's dynamic with mainly because I think it almost felt right when you saw Daniel Craig and Dench together in that first film, and I do think that it touched on sort of story, sort of introduced her relationship, obviously with Silver in Skyfall, how she had a past with him, and how Skyfall was massively down to her. I think Skyfall is M's movie. She created the villain. She, obviously she died at the end. Bond Bond took her to his home, and you could really tell that, she was the one that he needed to protect, and ultimately he didn't. But then I thought that was really interesting is that, okay, so M's died in Skyfall, so we're going to get a new Bond. And in the end, he goes into the office, he finds is there. We're all like, that's our new M, brilliant. That was the best decision that they made, was almost introducing this character and then forcing him to be in that role. Ray Fiennes is a fantastic actor. He's one of the best actors to never win an Oscar. Like he's never won an Oscar, which is crazy. I hope he does for this for the menu.
Oh yeah, I mean, I've finally watched the menu, and like I really hope that he gets an Oscar, like even just for that movie, because like because Ralph Fiennes, like there's so many movies that he did that he deserved an Oscar. Like there's so many movies that he did that he deserved it. So I'm really hoping the menu is the one. Just like
I think in Skyfall, to introduce him in it, and then replace the sort of and at the end you're like, oh, okay, so you're gonna have to adapt now to this role, and he did brilliantly in Spectre, where he was, almost he had absolutely no idea. He had his own issues. Bond was going off, and he's like, somebody just put a leash on Bond, like in Spectre. But I think Judi Dench and Daniel Craig's dynamic is the best Bond and M dynamic. The best line for me is well, there's actually two, if you don't mind. There's two. One's in Casino Royale, where at the end she almost tries to convince Bond that, because Bond goes immediately from caring about Vesper to then finding out what she's done and immediately go the other way. She's like, you did love her, and made that sort of like link. And then she went, are you going to come back for service? And he went, I never left. And he was like, yes. And that was a very serious moment. But for the comedy moment, I would say, obviously, when MI6 is blown up and they go underground, and he comes back, and he does the testing, and he just that dog, that bloody bulldog with the British bulldog, not the wrestler, but the British bulldog on her desk. It's like the whole building went up in flames, and that bloody thing survived. And then at the end, which was one of the greatest shots when he's standing over London. In 2012, obviously we had the Olympics over. 2012 was a massive year, for in terms of being in British culture. But the British flag, and Moneypenny gave him the present when this was left to you by her in her will, and it's the bloody dog, and it was amazing. It was just that almost like it was just fantastic. But it's just how he went. The whole building blows up and that bloody thing survived. She went, thank you very much for your exterior designing recommendations, James. But it's just brilliant. I just thought that was absolutely fantastic. Judi Dench is always been the best M for me.
Yeah, I mean, like, yeah, definitely. I mean, as I said before, like, of all the M's that were like in those movies for me personally, like I said, Judi Dench and Ralph Fiennes for me like were like the best M's, like that were ever like introduced in a James Bond movie, and I mean that's why I say, I mean, there's a lot of like Daniel Craig's like James Bond movies that you can like basically talk about, like we can talk about like in Infinite. For like basically through infinity and beyond, we can talk about like the James Bond movies, especially Daniel Craig, because like his movies for me personally as James Bond, I felt like they were perfect, because again, like from the characters to like the characters, the connections, revelations, twists, emotions, the overall story arc, beginning, middle, ending, like everything.
And the way it ended as well. The way
exactly, like the way how James Bond died. Spoiler alert if you didn't watch No Time to Die. I mean, what the hell were you doing? But
get a grip.
Get a fucking grip. But basically, when James Bond died, when like those rockets like hit like the island, like you really felt emotions, like basically going all in his head, like basically about his relationship with her, the daughter, like so many things were going on, and it felt, it was heartbreaking, but at the same time it felt like a journey that came to an end, that is completed.
There's two moments in the cinema where I have sat in my seat at the end of the film and was just a little bit just sort of stunned, where I could not move muscle if I tried. And the first one is a little movie called Avengers Infinity War, right up there on that poster, right up there. When they all, I'm like, what is going on? What is going on? And I was just, and then the second one was No Time to Die. When Bond died. Seriously, I did think it was going to be that great moment that it happens in all films. When something happens, they're all emotional, they're all just like in shock, and then he comes out of the rubble, and I was waiting for it. Absolutely, I was just waiting for it. And then at the end, when Leia Seydoux's character and the daughter is driving in the car, I think that's it.
Yep.
Like she's driving off, she's going to get a house, and he's going to be there in a thing. Got there's a new 007. She was put, obviously there's a new title. Brilliant. Right, that's good. It stopped. And my dad was sitting to my left, and I went, and everybody started to get up. Everybody got up, and I was like, are we going? And my dad was like, no. 1 minute. I just need to process what I've just watched. And that was it. And I was just like, what is going on? And I just thought, that's it for Bond. I literally think I just thought that's it.
Actually, what I would love to see. Yeah, I mean, like, actually, what I would love to see in the future James Bond movie, I would love to see James Bond like going in a mission, but basically one of the elements of the story is like competition, where basically like James Bond is competing against like let's just say like an American version of him, or like
Yeah.
a Russian version of him, or an Italian version of him. Like basically like where basically you show that every single country has like their own secret agency, and basically like in one movie, let's just
They
say
did that.
what.
They did that. They did that. They did an idea of that. It was called The Free Five, and that movie I would not recommend. That movie
Yeah.
was very difficult to get through. But no, carry on, please.
Yeah, but basically, like, I mean, like, okay, you have MI6 basically, and when it comes to like James Bond, so why not basically uh create a character that is like basically from CIA or FBI, basically that is like on James Bond's level, and basically like
I think
they go both on a mission, and basically it's like it's like basically a competition between them, and they're like the tides are down and everything, and basically like okay, we have to work together.
I mean, if we're gonna go with crazy ideas, I mean, at the moment, I mean, last year, 2022, in terms of films, was all about the multiverse. We had Doctor
Mhm.
Strange, with everything. We had everything everywhere all at once.
Okay, I know where you're going.
If we go, we go with like a Bond multiverse. Sadly, we can't have the great Sean Connery and the great Roger Moore. Unfortunately,
No.
we can't have them involved. But if we can get Lazenby, Dalton, Brosnan, and Craig chilling all together in a multiverse of Bond films, I'll be like, there we go, brilliant. Multiverse of Bond. We've got Spielberg directing and John Williams with the score. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. That is it for the episode. Like, that's it. It'd be crazy. My mind would just be blown. Like,
Yeah.
it's crazy.
I remember like one of my friends.
We've really gone now. We just given our best Bond ideas. Broccoli,
Oh my
write these
God.
down.
That would have been like extremely like motherfucking crazy, but like I remember like one time I was like talking like to one of my friends, and like we were like basically talking about like how we would create like new stories, or like new versions, like different stories like from many different franchises, and one of them was like James Bond, and basically like few of my friends like were basically saying like, well, how about James Bond fights like an actual supervillain, like I'm like, what do you mean, like mad scientist or something? I'm like, no, like a true supervillain, like with armor, with like laser hands or whatever, like or like actual superpowers and all of that. I'm like, okay, yeah, sure, but I'm like, okay, now you're going too much into the superhero genre, because that's not James Bond.
Black Adam, save Black Adam from the machetes we got last year, and then put in James Bond versus Black Adam. Yeah, give him like a super soldier serum, like something.
Oh my God. Actually, I'll be honest, of all the supervillains in from the MCU, actually who I can see him actually fit in James Bond movie?
I want to guess, but then I feel like there's a lot to guess from. Loki.
No.
Oh, that was my only guess.
Of all the villains in the MCU, I think like the one who could actually fit is actually down. I'm sorry, I'm talking to my dog.
That's fine.
Like I think like the one I think that could fit into the world of James Bond, just basically like of the overall character arc, the way how they introduced him and used him. Zemo.
Yes. Yeah, because again, like we were talking about inspirations of, in other franchises, like Falcon and Winter Soldier and when the Captain America the Winter Soldier was very much linked in that genre. Baron Zemo was that guy, and the way that we watched Falcon and Winter Soldier with a good friend of mine here at university, because he has not watched the Disney Plus shows, so we watched them, and we watched them in release date order. We're currently at Moon Knight, and he really liked Falcon and the Winter Soldier. But rewatching that, almost showing that Zemo did have the style of a Bond villain. He was like, and they did a lot with that character. He was in a movie that had massive pressure on him, and obviously pressure on him because he was the whole war was as the villain. In Falcon and Soldier, you really saw him as a Bond villain. So yeah, so Daniel would be a great Bond villain actor because he's that good. He's an actor and really know well. The I think could potentially end there. You know, to be mental. Again, Tom Hiddleston has been chucked around as a Bond. Trying to link everything Bond back to Bond and is what would you say is the chances of Tom Hiddleston being Bond?
I mean, honestly, I can definitely see Tom Hiddleston taking the James Bond mantle. I mean, like the way how he talks, the mannerism, the face. I mean, I could definitely see him, taking the role of James Bond. Definitely.
He's in a very good BBC One show over here in the UK called The Night Manager, and that's
I've heard of that.
Brilliant. Like that's yeah, he's fantastic, and he plays that sort of role where, again, like we mentioned Aaron Taylor Johnson earlier. I think his big audition, in terms of potentially being put himself in the running, was Bullet Train because of the way the way his character was. Henry Cavill we mentioned earlier. His idea, his audition was Man from U.N.C.L.E. That's sort of Tom Hiddleston's. In terms of The Night Manager, I can't recommend it enough because I do. You watch it and you go, "Yeah, you're an audition for Bond, aren't you?" Now with this performance, but again, that is probably the best way people can get on the radio. And when it comes to links, its themes and its ideas to Bond, you almost sort of feel like you could, if you do it really good here, you might be getting a call. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Do you think Henry? Generally, I know we spoke about this earlier. Do you think Henry Cavill will be Bond because he's in that time of his career now where it's like he's done with Superman? Do you think he needs a? I think he's an actor that can lead a franchise. Do you think he needs a franchise? Because he's finished with Superman, he's finished with The Witch. Do you think he? Do you think it's time for Cavill to get that role, or do you think it's too far gone now?
I mean, like, honestly, like, first and foremost, like, he's out as Superman. Now he's out as The Witcher. Like, season 3 is like the last one he did. Now he's going up to another franchise, which is Warhammer.
Yeah.
And Warhammer is a franchise that he's a big nerd when it comes to like his knowledge. He's a big gamer. And I think like now that he's part of Warhammer, I don't know if he's gonna share the time with like another franchise like James Bond. I don't think he will.
He's in this he's in his new movie. I'm just gonna briefly get it up for you to sort of for reference. But he's in a new movie that's coming out, which is a spy movie.
Oh yeah, I heard of that actually.
I am looking on my
Argyle,
and that's Matthew Vaughn again. So mixing that sort of styles, that potentially could be him. And that's got a great cast: Sam Rockwell, Bryce Dallas Howard, John Cena, Samuel L. Jackson, Bryan Cranston is all in there. That's a fantastic cast, but also Dua Lipa.
Also, like, I mean, like, now he's part of Argyle. He's part of Argyle. He's part of Warhammer. As I said before. But like, again, like, I mean, I totally agree. Like, he's now doing this spy movie like Argyle. And I mean, I mentioned before, the guy did The Man from U.N.C.L.E. He did that movie as well. And in that movie, he proved himself to be, really great when it comes to spy characters. And now he's doing Argyle, which, as we mentioned twice already, it's a spy movie, and he's the main character. He's the main actor. So I've seen The Man from U.N.C.L.E. I've seen him like in some of the different roles outside Superman and The Witcher, and yes, I mean, like, he does have elements of a great, James Bond. He really does, and so I mean, I would love to see him in the role of James Bond, but again, him being connected with Warhammer, even though I can definitely see him do other franchises as well, but like, I don't know Broccoli and the crew. I don't think they're gonna go with Henry Cavill.
I mean, I that you are going to when we spoke about Batman and that whole sort of debate about Affleck and Pattinson's about I mentioned about how and all we mentioned the Flash, and how I said about giving a young actor a chance and a possibility to take on that role. Like you said with Henry Cavill linked to the franchise, he's already got his franchise. I think every actor hopes for a franchise series they can keep coming back to. If you give an actor the chance and lead into the Bond one, what I don't think with Craig, I don't think a lot are going to be like, you can't, because Craig proved wrong massively. So if you give an up and coming chance to do that, and that could be really, really positive, because you're giving somebody that opportunity to really run with a very, very popular cinematic character. So I'm all for giving these opportunity, but Bond incredible thing 15 with Daniel Craig, where they've constantly we spoke if you start, that character could become so incredible because you've got every single perception in it.
Yeah, I get you. I get you.
The serious side, or is all actors to say, my part, and you either like it or you don't. But I tell you what, nothing will stop Bond. Nothing stopped Bond for 6 years in terms of making movies. You're not going to. And if somebody goes, I've got a different idea, they'll take it. That's really special and really exciting about this franchise.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, just like Marvel or DC or Star Wars, like James Bond, or even like Star Trek. Like James Bond is a franchise that is infinite. Like it's a franchise that has no end. Okay, like we may have covered like the novels of Ian Fleming, but you also have to realize, with like some of the Roger Moore movies, like to Timothy Dalton, to like Pierce Brosnan, Daniel Craig, like it proves that you can do a great James Bond movie, even like with completely new stories outside like Ian Fleming's novels as well. So yeah, I mean I mean the future, I can definitely see it being very bright when it comes to like James Bond. And honestly, I cannot wait to see or hear like actual fresh news, like who's gonna be the next James Bond, the story and everything. I really cannot wait to see or to hear what's gonna happen next.
Yeah, and also, I think last point, I feel like we've wrapped up in such a beautiful way. 6 years between Spectre and No Time to Die. That was massive down to the pandemic, but because they wanted to push it a little bit earlier. But 6 years, you still have people going, you can wait for 6 years and be there. Definitely, still interested in this character, regardless of films and series I've enjoyed for years. You still got a really, really character in, and like I said, it's my favorite franchise. I will continue to see all your DCs, all your stuff. Whatever people think pop and something to watch. I'll watch a spy movie.
Yeah,
I've got 26 films to choose from, and 26 great bloody films to choose from, and that's what's really special about it.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I think like we have come to an end. What do you think?
For me, it's been very popular. I've loved.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. Like, I think like we had a blast. We were chatting about like James Bond, the overall world of 007 and everything. So like every single like TV show or movie, every single story comes to an end, and it looks like this episode 4 as well. So everyone else, like, thank you for joining us for this like crazy James Bond 007 discussion, like live stream podcast, whichever you prefer to call it. So, like always, the traditional, YouTube protocol: comment, like, subscribe. You can follow me on my YouTube channel. You can follow this badass motherfucker here, FRC, on his YouTube channel. You can find it in the comment section down below. So, like always, here I am, Lord of Shadows, signing off.
The name's Kieran. Sign off.
And see ya until the next episode of the Shadow Council.